playoff format, there's been a lot of bitching and moaning about the divisional 2-3s and how unfair that can be. And it also happens to be that Toronto's been in a tough spot for a few years. So, the megaphone of the biggest hockey market in the world is always exaggerating things. They're going to get a softer touch this year in where Tampa is in the conference standings versus what it has been in the last few years. It looks like New Jersey's getting screwed. I don't mind the divisional idea. You're more likely to get rivals head to head in round one. You get, fan bases that can travel more easily. In theory, you have less travel in round one. Where are you on the divisional playoffs versus the 1-8 in the conference?
I think it's much ado about nothing. Like, what you have to beat the best to be the best. Whether you face them in round one, you face them in round three, who cares? And let me remind you that the Toronto Maple Leafs in recent years, it hasn't just been the Lightning or the Bruins. They also lost to the Columbus Blue Jackets, followed by the Montreal Canadiens. So whatever lack of success that they have is by their own doing. And I don't understand the belly aching or complaining. Right now, as you mentioned, it's the 5-6 matchup, technically in round one, if it were 1-8. And for the bulk of the season, it was still 4-5 between Leafs and Lightning. So that's what the matchup would have been. I like it the way it is. If I could tweak it in a small way, what I would do is, if there are wild card teams from both both divisions that make it, that make sure that those wild card teams remain in their actual own division. So meaning Winnipeg, if you make it in the 8th spot, you don't cross over to play the Pacific teams. If that's the way it ends up shaking out, you play just the Central teams. But I'd actually like to throw the whole thing out. And if you really want to value the regular season and put a true emphasis on rewarding the team that had the most success, like the Boston Bruins, let's go 1-16. And who cares about carbon offset from the planes? I don't care. I want the most entertaining bracket possible. And if that means an all California Stanley Cup final or a Pacific Division Stanley Cup final, who cares? Let's truly value the regular season.
Like, what if you had Vancouver, Tampa? That's a nightmare. That's a 6-hour flight. Like, is that not a disaster for round one? Hey, you're the 1 seed. Welcome to the biggest travel of the whole tournament.
But why is it any different for the Cup final? Why does no one bellyache then when we have Vancouver, Boston?
Because it's fair for both teams. It's the same path, right? They both start in division. They both travel more, and then you have an East-West final. That's why.
Well, what's fair about playing the 8th place team instead of the 16th if you're number one?
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, if you had the top 8 all in one conference, sure. Yeah.
I wonder too, is that
that's
part of
the way I see
it?
Why do you have to face this
travel?
Why should it be? Remember when the Kings and the Leafs played in the same division, for Christ's sake? Like, why is this a thing? Travel's gotten easier, not harder.
What's it like as a player?
It sucks. If you play in the East, I went to the finals twice in the East, and Florida is tough travel when you're in the East. And it was still easy. Couple hour flights. In Buffalo, you didn't notice the travel. Hardly at all. Traveling when we went to the final with Calgary, awful.
You also had really shitty matchups.
Awful.
San Jose's not close.
We were lucky
Detroit's
to start
far.
with Vancouver, but even with Vancouver, you had the time change. So, I mean, it's still something.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it can be brutal. But they're not going to change anything anyway. So I don't know why.
And regional rivals are good for sport, right? Like, the more Battle of Alberta's, the more Battle.
I don't expect they're going to change anything. So the playoff hockey is not bad. I don't hear anyone bitching and moaning at the end of round one going, this was terrible. I can't believe this. Only the team that loses goes, well, this wasn't fair because we had to play. Well, like Frank just said, if you want to win, guess what you have to do? Yeah. Win.
And I think it's
so.
Not so much round
let
one,
me put a bow on that, Mike.
I think that's. Go ahead.
Mike, yeah, my connection's finally back. I would say the other flip side of that is that if you really do a 1-16, it's all luck of the draw. So you could end up with a really close Stanley Cup final matchup geographically, where instead of it getting harder as the round goes on, you end up with an easy travel schedule for the last. It could be the last 2 rounds or 3 rounds, depending on what it looks like.